So just about another minute. We'll wait, hopefully, if people need. Okay, so we are at the 7:30 mark, and I will basically go ahead and turn it over for Becky for you to do your introductions. And I'll be working behind the scenes on the raffle in the meantime. So Nina, we're glad to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. And Becky, it's up to you.
There we go. Hi. During Nina's program this evening, Charlie and I will field questions and relay them to Nina. If you would like to ask Nina a question, please click your Q&A and enter your question in there, and we will relay your questions to Nina so that you can be answered. This can happen all during the program or at the end. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Nina Schoch. She is the Executive Director of the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation and has studied loons in New York's Adirondack Park since 1998. A wildlife veterinarian and rehabilitator. She is also a master's degree in natural resources wildlife management. Dr. Schoch practiced small animal medicine in New York's Adirondack Park from 1991 through 2002, is a member of numerous conservation and wildlife health related organizations, and has written many scientific and lay articles about the results of the Adirondack loon research. She received the 2018 Adirondack Research Consortium's Elizabeth Thorndike Adirondack Achievement Award, the 2011 New York State Outdoor Writers Association M. Paul Kiesler New York Outdoor Citizen Award, and was inducted into the New York State Outdoorsman Hall of Fame in 2014. Fantastic credentials. It's been a delight to communicate with Nina right up to this moment. And on behalf of DOAS, welcome Nina, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Yep, I appreciate the introduction. So now I'm going to share my screen. I'll start the slide presentation. If I can find it. There it is. Hopefully this will work. Share first. Okay. There we go. Okay, today I'm going to talk to you about some of the work we're doing with the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation. We started this organization, it became a nonprofit in 2017, so 3 years ago, and we're dedicated to promoting and inspiring passion for the conservation of common loons. And we do that through our scientific research and educational programming. We evolved from research that started in 1998, so 22 years ago, that was coordinated by Biodiversity Research Institute, and over the course of the last 22 years, it has grown quite a bit, and again, we became our own nonprofit 3 years ago. So I'm pretty excited about how things have evolved, and I look forward to sharing some of our work with you. We're studying loons because they're high on the aquatic food web. They eat fish that eat other fish, and so on, and invertebrates, crayfish, and so on down the food web. So toxins that accumulate in the lake system will accumulate to very high levels in loons because they're a top predator. They're also very territorial during the breeding season. They come back to the same spot year after year and defend that territory. Here's a loon doing a penguin dance, chasing another bird away from its nesting territory. They also live 20 to 30 years. Some of the birds that we abandoned in 1999, 98, we are still studying today. So that's pretty exciting to get to know individual birds for that long a time. So all those characteristics make them a great biological indicator of what's going on in the aquatic habitats where they live. In New York, they're a species of special concern. They aren't threatened, they aren't endangered, but DEC does want to keep an eye on their population, and we're helping with that. They're also a symbol of wild, remote places. People really like loons, so they're a great way to teach people about environmental concerns because people will come to a presentation about these really cool birds and learn about some of the threats that are affecting them and their populations. And so with that, we're able to talk to people about what they can do in their own lives to minimize some of the threats affecting loons and their habitats. There are actually 5 species of loons. In the Adirondacks, we have the common loon here that breeds regularly every summer. And we occasionally have the red-throated loon here at the bottom that migrates through, often in November and December, and sometimes on the way back north in the spring. They are in winter plumage then, so they don't look quite as pretty here. And very rarely we've seen a Pacific loon in the park. Further west, all 5 of these birds breed up in Canada and western Alaska, all the way to western Alaska. There's the Pacific loon that breeds out along the west coast, and then the Arctic loon breeds very far west in the Aleutian Islands and then to the eastern Europe. In Europe, they're called divers. So the great northern diver is the common loon, the red-throated diver is the red-throated loon, and so on. Yeah. We call them the feathered fish. Hopefully this will start. Let me back up one more time. There it is. And everything about loons is designed to decrease water resistance as they swim through the water. Their bodies are streamlined and their bones are dense and heavy, and their legs are flattened this way, laterally, so they can cut through the water like a knife. And then when they open their feet are almost as big as my hands. So you can imagine that a 10, 15-pound bird gets a lot of propulsion from those size feet. I'll run that video again so you can see it. And also their legs are turned sideways, and their body goes down to their knees. If you look there on that video, you'll see that they really can't stand because their legs are in such an awkward position, and so they kind of flop forward on the water. So they have a lot of difficulty walking on land, but they are very efficient swimmers. There are 4 colors of loons. When they first hatch, they're a little black downy puff ball. And then within a couple of days, they get a brown down that they keep for 7 to 8 weeks. And then around the time they're 8 to 9 weeks, they start looking pretty goofy because they've got down sticking out and feathers coming in. But by the time they're 9 weeks, they have this beautiful, sleek, gray, scaly plumage. And they keep that for 2 to 3 years. In the winter, the adults also look a lot like the juveniles. The adults only have this black and white plumage during the breeding season. And they molt that out starting in October, in late September, early October. And then along again in February, March, they do a full body molt and a wing molt too. They're flightless for about a month before they get the breeding plumage again in March and April. So they go through 2 molts a year, but only one wing molt a year. And they have a variety of calls. I'm hoping that you will be able to hear these. I'm not sure. This is the whale call. Can everybody hear that? Yeah, good. So that's a long distance communication call between adults. And they usually do it when one bird's on the water and a bird is flying over. And then the bird on the water will wail to let them know that territory is occupied. They also do it when 2 birds are swimming and hunting and they go down and one comes up and doesn't know where the other bird is. It might give a wail. The other call people are very familiar with is the tremolo. And that is a distress call. That's probably what this bird is doing here with the chick. And letting that photographer know it's a little too close for its comfort. And if you hear that, something's wrong. Look around and see if maybe there's an eagle there or another loon too close for its comfort. They will also tremolo. They've got a flight tremolo they do when they're flying overhead. And so I live about a mile from a lake, and almost every morning in the summer I hear a loon flying going back to the lake. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but it's pretty consistent. The males, only the males, do a yodel call. It sounds like this. And that they do when they're very upset, when they're guarding their territory. Usually they do it when they're fighting with each other, but I also hear it when there's an eagle overhead, that they'll start wailing and tremoloing and yodeling, or a boat's too close to the chick. So if you're hearing a yodel, something is wrong. And again, only males do yodels, females aren't able to do them. Now if you're out there and you hear hoots, oops, the wrong one. Ah, now I really messed up. Here we go, let's try again. You might hear hoots, and if you're hearing hoots, then you know that you can keep watching as long as you want. Those birds are not upset and they're just talking to each other. There's a lot of variations on all these calls. I usually hear hoots when it's a family together and they're just swimming along, drifting and talking. This time of year, late September, October, the loons will gather up in big groups and they'll be doing a lot of hooting and talking to each other. I also hear hoots, excuse me, when the chicks are begging from the adults, and they just are constantly begging, and then the adult will go down and come up with a fish and it'll hoot. So that's pretty consistent that you hear those. So hold on, it looks like we've got a question here. So the question is, how do loons compare with other Adirondack waterfowl as a biological indicator with regards to longevity? So actually, loons are not considered waterfowl. That's a term, a type of bird that is related to ducks and geese. Loons are actually a water bird, so it's different there. Loons are one of the longer lived species. Again, they live 20 to 30 years, and most waterfowl live anywhere from about 5 to 10 years. Geese may live a little bit longer, but loons are a better biological indicator because they're higher on the food web, so they'll eat more fish and so on that are higher up the food chain and can collect more toxins that bioaccumulate. So ducks and geese, for the most part, are herbivorous, although there are some fish-eating ducks that are such as mergansers, and other ducks. Some ducks will eat shellfish too, crustaceans. So, but again, they aren't eating fish that are as high on the food chain or as large as the loons will eat. So, there are a lot of threats that affect loons in their habitats. And here I've put together a list of many of them. And if you look at them, there's a common thread through them. Wildlife predators are the possible exception, except that humans, where there are more humans, there's more garbage, and there's more opportunistic predators. So if humans are able to decrease their impacts on loons and on the environment, they're going to help loons and many other animals too. So, and you'll see that we can do a lot of things to change what we're doing to the environment. Mercury is the contaminant that Biodiversity Research Institute started studying in the park in 1998, and it's been an ongoing study since then. The primary source of mercury in the United States was from the coal-fired power plants in the Midwest. Methylmercury is the toxic form that bioaccumulates up the food web and concentrates in the loons. And males are more affected than females because males are larger They weigh 10 to 13 pounds in the Adirondacks, and females weigh 8 to 10. And then also, because they're larger, they can eat bigger fish than the females do. And females can also deposit some of the mercury in their bodies into the eggs that they lay. So sometimes chicks hatch with high mercury levels. Now, it's a neurotoxin, so it makes them feel more depressed and lethargic, and they don't defend the territory as well. They may not incubate the eggs as well. They may not care for the chicks as well. And if a chick hatches with high mercury levels, it may not have the energy to get up on the parent's back, which protects it from predators and keeps it warm. So the overall impact of mercury on loons has been to decrease the reproductive success. And what biodiversity found is that 3 parts per million or more is where they really started to see an impact on the reproductive success of loons. They also found from west to east across North America that the mercury levels went up, and both in the males and the females. And so the good news is that there have been emission regulations that have taken effect, and the deposition of mercury has decreased since those took effect in about 2010. So over the last 10 years, we've seen a change. So in the Adirondacks, we've been looking at loons on more than 100 lakes throughout the park. We've been sampling birds in every single watershed. So we have a pretty good reflection of what's going on here in the park. We've developed what's called a mercury hazard profile, which is how much mercury in the loons themselves. And we do this by going out and actually capturing the birds, and I'll show a video later on of how we do that. We use what's called night lighting techniques and playback. We do the chick calls to call on the adults and the hoop calls to call on the chicks, and they will literally come inches from the boat, and then we can scoop them out of the water with a net. Then we place these a color combination of plastic bands and a USGS aluminum band on the legs. And you can see how flat the legs are and how big the feet are. There's my hand and there's the bird's foot. And so we can identify individual birds from a distance. And this is how we know we've monitored some of the same birds for 20 years or more. And we draw a blood sample from the birds. And that tells us a lot about mercury levels in the food that they've eaten in the last month or so. And we also have done health assessments on some of the birds. And so we're trying to get as much information from the birds in the limited time we have them in hand. Then we hire field staff each summer to monitor their reproductive success. And our staff are looking for the bands here. And this is a bird on its right leg. It has a yellow and a silver band. So that's one way we can tell it apart. And then we look at the left leg and we see what the band is on that one. And then we want to find out, first off, if they come back from migration. Here's a bird with a green over silver on the right leg, and then an orange over green on the left. And they have to slide, they belly slide on the water to land. So you can see if a bird comes down on land instead of on water, it could be quite painful. And we want to find out if they pair up. Usually the birds come back from migration as soon as the ice lets out, actually. So in late April usually. This year ice let out in early April, and we had birds back on the water pretty quickly. And then the males come back first, and then the females come back a couple weeks later. And then they pair up, usually sometime in May. And here's another banded bird. You can see the green band right there. And then by late May, they're starting to nest. And here's the bird going up on a nest. They put them right by shore because they can't walk very far. You can see how difficult it is for them to get up like that. Kind of using their wings to balance a little bit. And they usually lay 1 or 2 eggs. Sometimes we've had birds lay 3 eggs. And as you can see, they're turning the eggs. And incubation lasts about 26 to 28 days. The first egg that's laid hatches first, and that chick is a little bit bigger than the other chick, and it ends up being they have a little bit of sibling rivalry the first day or two, where the bigger ones try to establish dominance over the younger one. And sometimes they can cause a real problem for the younger one, especially if food is limited. The bigger one may grow faster and outcompete the younger one. It takes almost 3 months for these chicks to be able to fly. And here's an example of a bird, a chick, that is quite capable of feeding itself, but it's still harassing the parent around the bill and asking it to go down and get food. And here's a little tiny tidbit that female got for it. The chick is as big as, if not bigger than, its mom. So you can see that the parents most likely leave to migrate before the chicks just because they're tired of being harassed. We're trying to find out how many chicks survive to fledging. And this chick has all its flight feathers in, and it's quite capable, again, of caring for itself and flying at that stage of the game. We also looked at how much mercury was in the water, in the food web that the birds are in. And so we looked at the water, the sediment, the plankton, the crayfish, and the fish that the birds are eating. And we found that the mercury levels did go up through the aquatic food web. And you can see they're much higher levels in loons than they are in the water. So they bioaccumulate and bioconcentrate up the food web. So this part was based on a study we did looking at the levels of mercury in the birds from 98 to 2007. And we found at that point in time that 21% of the males and 8% of the females had mercury levels high enough to impact their reproductive success. And we also found that low mercury birds and high mercury birds were nesting about the same, but the low mercury birds were hatching many more chicks than the high mercury birds. Chick survival was close, so the overall productivity at that point was being driven by the hatching success. We also found that on acidic lakes, the mercury levels in the loons were higher, and that's because both for females and for males. And that's because there's a bacteria in acidic lakes that's more prevalent. And that bacteria converts elemental mercury to methyl mercury at a higher rate. So there's higher exposure of mercury on acidic lakes. And back in the 80s, with acid rain, there were many lakes, about a quarter of the lakes in the park were very acidic and fish were not able to survive in them. And the mercury levels in those fish that did survive and in loons on those lakes were very high. And that was primarily in the southwestern part of the park that we were seeing that high mercury levels in the birds and also in the fish. The good news is, as I mentioned before, that mercury emission and acid deposition regulations, emission regulations, took effect in the 1990s through 2010 and have really decreased lake acidity and mercury deposition across the park and across the Northeast, actually, and in the Adirondacks too. And so there's been a lot of chemical recovery in the lakes, and we can see that in the mercury levels in loons. From the late 90s to 2010, the mercury levels were increasing in the birds, and then about 2010, they leveled off and plateaued off. So that's great news. The problem is that in the past couple years, on a federal level, the emission regulations have been taken backwards, and if things don't change with that, we're expecting that we'll start seeing more acid deposition, more mercury deposition in the Northeast again. Here's an example of a lake that showed a significant decrease in mercury levels. In Ferris Lake, the mercury levels in the loons were some of the highest that we had. And then in 1999, when we first sampled there, and then 2006, you can see how much lower they were, less than half of what they were back in 99. So that's great news there. So the data that we are collecting is shared not only in the scientific papers, publications that we do, but also with policymakers so that we can inform them about how we're using loons as a mercury monitoring symbol, I guess, so that we can evaluate how mercury emissions are the effectiveness of mercury emissions in the environment. And so these are some of the reports that we came out with, and this is something that Biodiversity did, and they've actually brought down to Congress and helped. It was one line of evidence in the reasoning behind imposing regulations on mercury emissions. On a global level, Biodiversity has also worked with the United Nations Environment Program to form the Minamata Treaty between, I can't remember how many countries, but it's over 150 countries, I think, in 2013 to reduce mercury, the use of mercury on a global level, both emissions and use in artisanal mining and so on. So hopefully mercury emissions will decrease significantly in the future across the world, not just in New York State and in the United States. So I find on a personal level that scientific papers can be a bit dry and hard to read and understand, interpret. So we take what we're learning on a scientific level and bring it down to what we call our science summary papers. And here we have several examples of several of them, which are available on our website. And you can get the gist of the results of our studies here through these papers. And I hope you enjoy reading them. Another study we did was to look at migration in the loons, and we did that through satellite transmitters. And here's an example of a surgery that's being done to put a transmitter in a bird. This is what they look like after they receive the transmitter. And you can see that why one of our field staff called them the remote control birds. This was done a few years ago, almost 10 years ago now. And we did this on just a few birds in the park with, here's one here, an example of one. He received his transmitter on August 20th, and he stayed on his breeding lake through November 14th. And there's two other birds here in New Hampshire that received their transmitters about the same time. Those were females. And you can see on November 16th, his transmitter signaled off the coast of Long Island, and then November 19th, he was off in New Jersey, and he hung out there through January. The redbird, same type of thing, off to the coast of Maine, November 15th, and through mid-January. The bluebird, unfortunately, the transmitter malfunctioned. The mortality signal did not go off, but the transmitter stopped working. So we think that it was a battery problem, but went to the Maine coast and hung out there through mid-December. And mid-April, he's still off the coast of New Jersey, and she's still off the coast of Maine. April 19th, he's off the coast of Long Island again, and April 21st, he's on his territory on his breeding lake. She, on the other hand, took her sweet time getting back to her territory a good 2 weeks after the male. And so we decided to go up to southern Maine and find out what was going on there. And, you know, I was very curious to see what was going on. And we figured out that there were a lot of outlet stores there in southern Maine. So we're pretty certain that she was shopping her way back. That's why she took so long to get back there. So, very smart bird. This is what he looked like the day we took the transmitter off. And he was raising a chick with his female and continued to do so that summer. And then presumably the next winter went back to New Jersey and spent that winter there again too. So we were curious to know about how juveniles migrated compared to adults. And based on a huge sample size of one juvenile, this one, you can see the difference. The yellow bird here is the male that we just looked at, straight to the coast, whereas the juvenile got his transmitter, in mid-August and wandered around New York lakes as they froze up. He didn't know where to go, and then finally he found out his way 2 months after the adult to the coast of Long Island. So it took him a lot longer to figure it out, and I think that what happens is that migration in loons is learned, and once they learn it, they make a beeline to the coast. This is what they look like when they're flying. They are powering their way. They can't glide like raptors can, so they have to fly nonstop and it takes a lot of energy for a loon to migrate. They're flying very fast too. And here's an example of a bird that happened to be signaling as she was migrating. She went back and forth to her breeding lake, and then November 5th at 10:49 in the morning, we got the first signal from her. And 7 hours later, she's off the coast of Cape Cod there. So she did that flight straight through, which is about how long it takes me to drive to Cape Cod. Actually, it takes me a lot longer to drive to where she went. And then she went over here to Buzzards Bay area at one point in the winter. And then May 6th, she's off the coast of, in some lakes in Massachusetts. May 9th, 8:23 in the morning, she signaled. And then 4 o'clock in that afternoon, she's back on her breeding lake. And this bird ended up being a very important bird because there was an oil spill here in Buzzards Bay back in 2003. And because of this bird and a couple others that we did, they told us that New York birds use this area where the spill occurred. And now, because of that, there's a restoration plan for common loons that has just come out. And New York will probably be receiving some of the funding from that plan to help restore the loon population here in New York, which is great. That will help us quite a bit. Here's what she looked like when she came back from migration. This is the same bird as in the previous picture. And you can see she looks great. Her antenna looks a little worse for wear. It's got kind of a dip in it and all that. But she looks wonderful 2 days after. And we tried to catch this bird again, like we caught the other one, to take the antenna off, and she wouldn't let us do it. She didn't have chicks. And so we tried for several years and we couldn't find her again. And then we finally found her on a different lake, and we caught her finally with chicks. And we took the transmitter we couldn't find anymore, and she had lost it somehow. And then we placed a geolocator on her band here, and then we had to recatch her again a year later and download the data from that geolocator. It turns out she went to the same area that winter too. So we're pretty certain they set up winter territories as well as breeding territories. And somebody asked if the young tend to breed near their birth territory. And what happens with the young is that they stay on the coast for 2 to 3 years, and then they come back to the same general area. Like the Adirondack loons will come back to the Adirondacks, and then the Maine loons will go back to Maine, and so on. So they're pretty imprinted on the area where they were raised, but they may not come back to the same lake. And it can take them several years to establish a territory of their own because there's already breeding birds on those territories. So they have to fight with them to get a territory of themselves. Okay. And there we go. So another study we've been doing is to look at the nesting success using trail cameras, because our field staff are out there once a week looking for the birds, but the trail cameras catch a lot of observations that we aren't able to do. So for example, this bird slipped off the nest and there were 3 eggs in the nest. And at night, a beaver came and visited this one. And herons often walk by, and the loons don't seem to mind the herons. Here's an example of a banded bird that just hatched a chick, and the banded bird is going up to incubate the second egg. They've also told us things about that we didn't expect at all, such as this bear that was coming in to eat the eggs in 2018. We had 2 nests that year that where the bears ate the eggs that were confirmed with the cameras, something we hadn't known before. So that was pretty interesting, and that was a very bad bear year in the Adirondacks. There were a lot of young bears from the previous year that were getting into trouble that year. So I don't know if this occurs every year or just happened to do that in 2018. One thing that does happen pretty regularly is water level rise, usually due to torrential rainstorms related to climate change. And here's 2015 on June 22nd. In that year, we had over 10.5 inches of rain in 3 weeks' time, right in the middle of loon nesting season. So June 22nd at 6:11 p.m., and this is what that nest looked like. Then it started raining, and this is what it looked like 12 hours later, about 6 a.m., and there was 1.5 inches of rain that occurred on June 23rd, and by the end of that day, that nest was gone, along with several others that year. And this is an example of another bird whose nest got washed out. That's what it looked like on the 23rd. We also found that human disturbance was a big problem. So in 2013, the first year we did the trail camera study, we had 3 cameras that we put out, and this happened to, we happened to catch this and several other pictures like this on one of the cameras. And because of that, we worked with DEC, and now we have these buoys that we place out at around nest sites that have a high chance of disturbance. And so hopefully increasing public awareness to avoid harassing loon nests by getting that close. Another factor that we've been doing is to protect loons by rescuing them. And let's see. So over the years, we've had reports of loons that have fishing line entanglement. And when I first started doing this work back in the late 90s, we get maybe a couple a year of reports of birds that needed rescue. And this year, for example, we probably had over 50 calls, emails and calls from people that were concerned about loons. Fortunately, most of those were loons that were doing normal things, such as taking a bath, and the people just didn't understand that was normal behavior. But a lot of the birds get tangled in fishing line, and some birds, especially the young birds, get iced in if we have a sudden freeze up. They stay too long and they don't realize that they're supposed to move, and then it can go from above 0 to way below 0 overnight, and they get frozen in. And then sometimes we have a fishing line bird, such as this one that had a lure caught on its wing, and it we tried several times that fall to catch it, and it wouldn't let us do it. So then we just waited until it iced in, and it was still there, so we were able to catch it then. And we've also started a fishing line recycling program to help prevent exposure of the loons to fishing line. And so we are providing these tubes to organizations throughout the park to maintain a container and hopefully recycle the line. Another program that we've started is the Loon Friendly Lake Certification Program, and we started that this year, this summer. So a lake association signs up, and they do a lot of different projects to improve the lake and help protect the loons that live on the lake. So things such as cleaning up the lake around the shoreline and also under the water by snorkeling, protecting nests, monitoring the loons, and providing education to the renters and other lake owners along the shore. So if anybody is a member of a lake association, is interested in learning about this program, definitely feel free to contact us. People want to know how they can help loons, and basically on the water it's common sense. If you're an angler, please use non-lead fishing tackle, and that's because loons sometimes catch a fish that have fishing line still attached and tackle still attached, and then if they eat a piece of lead fishing tackle, it can kill them, even just one tiny lead sinker, because the acids in their stomach break down the lead and then it gets absorbed through the stomach lining. And then also fishing line, collecting fishing line is really important because they will, especially if a line breaks, you want to get that line up because the loons will catch fish that still have line attached. And then the majority of birds that we see with fishing line have it wrapped around their heads or their mouths. Very rarely is it a bird that has it hooked in their wing or around their leg or something like that. But I think what happens is they eat a fish that still has line attached and they feel this line hanging down, and then they whip their head around and try and get it off, and then they end up getting tangled. The other thing is to learn normal behaviors and watch them from a distance. I was away the week that this picture was taken, and my husband emailed me and he said, I got a report on a dead loon. What do you want me to do? And I said, well, go out and collect it and send it down to the wildlife pathology lab so that we can find out why it died. The next day, I get an email from him with this picture attached, and it said, dead loon lives. And so this bird was on a nest. It's doing what's called a hangover position, and it was a very still bird. It was a sticker. It was sticking to the nest, even though the people that reported it and my husband were too close for its comfort. It was trying to hide from them. And my husband saw it laying there, and he thought it was dead too. He went up to it, and then he realized that it was looking at him, and he pulled way back. But if this bird had been one that startled easily, it could have, startled off the nest and kicked an egg out of the nest. So it's really important to watch nests from a distance and not get too close, because you don't want to startle a bird off the nest. And then watch for chicks, especially if you're out in a motorboat or a jet ski, because the chicks can't swim very fast, especially if they're small, and they may end up getting separated from the parents, or sometimes we've had chicks and adults get hit by boats and propellers. So definitely keep an eye out for the birds when you're on the water. On land, it's basically energy conservation and recycling as much as you can, trying to minimize your trash. Trash has to go somewhere, and it's going to go either to landfills or get burned, incinerated. And so it's really important to decrease the pollution that we produce into the air and the land, because it goes into the water and the soils, and it comes out into us too. So our work is supported through a variety of grants and donations. I spend a lot of time raising funding for our work and keeping all our different projects going. We have a lot of education programs, and we also have the research, the continual research that we're doing. And so I invite you guys to help support our work over time and join our work and sign up for our mailing list too. You can sign up by emailing info@adkloon.org to learn more about our work. And we also receive a lot of in-kind support from a variety of organizations, and those have helped us numerous ways throughout the years. So we're very grateful to our in-kind supporters. And if you're interested in learning more, we hope you can visit our nest, the Adirondack Loon Center in Saranac Lake. We are in the process of developing exhibits there so you can learn more about loons. And we also have a little store, which we have an online store too, so you can visit us online if you'd like. Our website is adkloon.org. And again, feel free to email me, info@adkloon.org, and sign up for the mailing list. And with that, I'm happy to take more questions if you'd like. So feel free.
Nina, I have a question for you. In regards to fishing line, what's the process if a fisherman has a line that breaks? How do you retrieve that? Or is the recommendation more along the lines of know what you're doing so that you're using line that's strong enough? Like, how could you prevent that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are biodegradable lines out there. They take several years to degrade, but they're better than just the plastic line as far as breaking down the environment. It's almost invariable that a line is going to get snagged either in a tree above or under the water, or a fish will break a line. And it's just really hard. If a fish breaks a line, that's it. You can't get that back. But if it gets in a tree, I mean, we were paddling the other day and we saw a line in a tree and we pulled it out and it was many feet there. And there's no reason why somebody that got it caught in the tree couldn't have pulled that out. And loons aren't the only ones that get caught in line. I mean, there's a lot. As a wildlife rehabber, I see a lot of animals, birds usually, that have line They've been tangled in two. And for example, eagles and osprey are regulars at catching fish that have line attached and lures, and almost every nest, eagle and osprey nests, have line and lures in them too. So that's a real problem for other birds. And especially if they get snagged underwater, like if you see line floating, or if you can snorkel along the shoreline. My husband snorkels regularly, and he picks up so many lures and lots of line every year. So by doing those lake cleanups, you can definitely help improve things.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sure. Any other questions? Oh, wait, there's one. The herons have the same mercury problems as loons. I would guess so. Almost any fish-eating bird at the top of the food chain that lives a long time could definitely have that problem. You know, eagles definitely do, and ospreys probably do too. And I know animals like otters, there's been mercury found in otters too. So. Any other questions? No?
It doesn't look like it. Oh, there's
here's
one. Oh, there's a couple.
Yep, okay. All right. I'll answer the mate for life question first. Do loons mate for life? The answer is no. And very few birds actually mate for life. In the case of loons, it seems like they're more tied to their territory. It's called site fidelity. It's tied to their breeding territory than they are to each other. So the bird that comes back first and will stick to the territory, and then sometimes one of the mates doesn't come back from migration, or will come back later, and another mate has come in and ended up taking over the territory. So, example, a new male may come into the territory before the original male gets there, and then they'll fight, and sometimes they'll fight to the death. So so the new male may come in, and for example, one of the territories I monitor, both birds were banded, and then an unbanded pair came in and took over that territory, and the banded pair ended up setting up a new territory in the lake. And then the next year, the banded female was back with the unbanded male, and the banded male had found a new territory on another lake. So, and then we banded the unbanded male, and he's been there ever since. So another pair that I monitor has had, the male had like 3 or 4 mates that we banded over about a 10-year period, and then he disappeared, and there's been 2 new males since then in that territory. So they do switch pretty periodically. Somebody else said she found a grebe far from a lakeshore in the middle of a field. It was a huge snowstorm and it was exhausted. So I collected the loon, I don't know if it was a loon or a grebe, and took it to the open water. Do loons land in fields in storms? And the answer is yes. They do often get blown down in storms, and that's happens to be one of the primary causes that we get rescue calls. This year we had about 10 birds that we tried to rescue, and several of them were fishing line birds. A couple were birds that were dying, presumably from lead poisoning, and those birds are getting necropsied, so we'll find out why. And then also I think we had 3 road rescues where they came down on roads, or I've had them come down in fields. One came down in our local dump, in the compost pile of the dump. So they sometimes get blown down in a storm. Other times they may be sick and they come down because they're sick. So, and then here's another one. We periodically see loons on lakes here in the summer, and I'm assuming that that's somebody from, I'm not sure where that location is, and they want to know what their status is. Hippio, what's Hippio?
Nina, that would be Otsego Lake here in the
Otsego.
Cooperstown area.
Okay, great, thank you. So those birds are probably migrating through that area. And sometimes the loons in New York, their population has gradually expanded over time. In the 1970s, DDT was banned, and I think that they had to have been one of the species that were affected by DDT. I don't know how they couldn't have been. And so after DDT was banned, a lot of bird populations, the predatory bird populations, recovered, like osprey and cormorants. And then others were reintroduced, like the peregrine falcons and bald eagles. And loons have slowly expanded their range across New York, and we have seen breeding loons as far west as the Finger Lakes too. So they do visit lakes outside of the Adirondacks. It's just in New York State. Usually it's birds that are migrating through, but occasionally there are birds that actually set up territories and breed in other areas of New York State. In addition to coal burning, are there other significant sources of mercury found in Adirondack lakes? There are point sources of mercury throughout North America. For example, in Ravenna, New York, there was a big point source there that was showing up through levels in people too. So, and that was through an industrial plant. So by decreasing the emissions from the point sources and then also from the coal-fired power plants across the world, not just in New York State and in the Midwest, we're decreasing the mercury emissions and mercury deposition that are affecting animals and people throughout the world. So, I mean, mercury has been found in the Arctic, in polar bears there, and other places that are pretty remote. And so that is being blown by the prevailing winds and the jet stream across the world. Is there a list of what lakes are part of the loon-friendly lake certification program? At this point, we don't yet have that up on our website, but as we get more lakes involved, we will be putting a map on the website and it's under our conservation page on the website. So if you go up to our website, let me see if I can share that. Hold on. I'll be right back with the sharing. Apparently the internet is slow. Here it comes. Okay, so this is our web page here. And I have to move this box first. Okay, so under the conservation, here's the Adirondack Loon Friendly Lake Certification Program. And you can see what's involved with participating in the program and what we can provide and so on. So that it doesn't take a lot to become a certified lake, but it helps a lot. It helps both wildlife and the lake itself. And then we also have the fishing line recycling program, and we're going to be adding in a lead buyback program in the next few months that hopefully will have sites all over the park by summer that will be participating in that. Is it recommended for a passerby to collect a loon and transport it to water if found far from a water source? If not, what is the recommended action in that case? And yes, it is recommended if you find a loon on land that's not right by water. If it's right by water, it might be just one that got injured and it might recover on its own, or it might be on a nest. So, but if it's found on a road or far from land, you want to toss a towel over its head and body and then put it in a padded box. I usually do that by taking a big towel and rolling it up into a donut and then putting the bird on the donut in the box. And then ideally you get it to a wildlife rehabilitator so they can evaluate it and make sure it doesn't have any broken bones or anything like that. But if it's acting bright and alert and you don't have access to a wildlife rehabilitator, then you can take it to an open water source. When I have the birds that come in, I often evaluate them and do a physical exam on them, and then I test them in a tub of water first to make sure that they can swim okay. Because I have had some birds come in that were down for a while and were no longer waterproof, and if I put them in the water, they would have ended up dying because they were not able to keep themselves dry and would have gotten hypothermic. So that one I sent to a rehab center that specialized in loons, and they were able to care for it for quite a while before it got released. And loons in Minnesota are suffering from mosquito increases in warmer weather. Is this a problem in the Adirondacks? I'm not sure about mosquitoes, but I do know that in the Adirondacks and in Michigan, Wisconsin, black flies can be a huge problem for nesting loons. And that's, they just will torment them around the head and so on, and keep the birds from, the birds just want to get away from them, because sitting there with thousands of black flies around their head is pretty frustrating and irritating. So they aren't incubating as well. They'll actually abandon a nest because of black flies. And both black flies and mosquitoes are blood-borne parasites, and are blood-sucking parasites, and they can ingest, they can transfer, they're a vector, they can transfer diseases to loons. So we end up with, we have seen blood parasites in loons in recent years that we were not finding in earlier years. Can I speak more to the issue of waterproofing that you mentioned? Why and how do birds lose their waterproofing? So most birds that live in the water do a lot of preening, and they have the oil gland at the base of the tail, and they'll massage some of the oil through their feathers, but also just the physical motion of preening their feathers puts the shafts and all the feather bits in line and keeps them waterproof. If a bird is sick and is not preening very much, it's going to lose its waterproofing. So the best example I have, let's see if I can share this too. Hang on. Are two birds that came in on the same day back in 2013. It was a very cold day, and it was in November, and they came in on the same day. Let's see if I can find it. Hang on a second. The first one came in the morning. Here we go. And it was a juvenile. Came from about an hour away, alone. And new share. See if this works. Takes a minute for it to come up. So this first one was a juvenile. Hopefully the photo will come in a second. Here he is. And you can see juvenile plumage. It was a below zero day when he came in. He came in the morning. And I evaluated him in the bathtub here. Not the same one I use, but and he was fine. You can see how nice and dry he is, and he's swimming fine. Nothing was awkward about how he was swimming. So I put a band on him and I released him. He went over to Lake Champlain, and then Let's see. Yeah. See if I can switch it out now. And then that evening, about 10 o'clock that night, 9 o'clock that night, I had a state trooper knock on my door, and he brought this bird in. Can you see that? Is that, no? Okay, hang on. Okay, can you see him now? Okay, so this is a male bird that came in that night. And again, this was a below zero day. I think he was down for quite a while. You can see his feathers are not very well in line, and he ended up being really wet in the bathtub. And so he's the one that I sent off to get, you can see he's the water's not beating up on his back or anything. He's the one I sent off to Tufts to get, and here's the juvenile again. See how much drier the juvenile looks than the other? So the juvenile got released because he was doing much better than the male. And, this bird just looked wet. And they have down underneath these outer feathers, and if the outer feathers are wet, the down's going to get wet, and they're going to get very chilled. So, any other questions? No? Okay. Oh, there's one. Well, the photos are super helpful. Sure, I love showing photos anytime. Good.
Well, Nina, we dearly appreciate your knowledge of, enthusiasm for, and dedication to loon conservation.
Well, thank you
We've
very
learned
much.
so much this evening. Sincere thanks. Can't wait to get to Saranac Lake.
Okay, that would be great. And again, in the meantime, feel free to contact me, and either by email or phone. And you can download our brochures off our website and, have fun touring the website.
It looks wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.